Hello, everybody. Um, if you were in person A through K first period, you really already saw this PowerPoint. We didn't get to talk about it too much during second period, but um, so this would be mainly targeted for L through Z as well as second period A through K. We are going to be moving on from Jefferson's presidency, and we'll be moving into James Madison's presidency and the War of 1812. And that's what your reading assignment has also been about. And so that was the reading assignment that L through Z was supposed to do yesterday, and then A through K should work on today as well. So like I said, we're going to start talking about the War of 1812. And so this PowerPoint goes over the causes of that war, and it is commonly referred to as the Second War for Independence because it is between Great Britain and the US. So the election of 1808, following the precedent of George Washington, Thomas Jefferson would step down as president after 2 terms. He is the first president to follow that precedent set by Washington because Adams was not reelected for his second term. And so Jefferson is the first to follow in Washington's footsteps, and many more follow. James Madison, Jefferson's Secretary of State, would continue the Democratic-Republican Party in government and elected the 4th president of the United States. So just really quick, because I know this was some confusion for some reason the other day still, Democratic-Republican is one party, not two, one party. James Madison would inherit the same troubles as Thomas Jefferson, the war between Britain and France. And so at the end of last week, at the beginning of this week, we talked about the Embargo Act, and that was, during Jefferson's presidency, and kind of highlighted the tensions between Britain and France and American trading ships, especially. This map over here kind of shows the electoral votes, just like the other maps that we've previously looked at. We kind of see that overall, Madison was a very popular choice. Pinckney does tend to be more popular in the North, but Madison really, in terms of how geographically this looks, Madison has much more area covered than during the previous elections. Usually we can see a pretty northern and southern divide in those first few elections, and now we see a more unison kind of spread. So Jefferson had issued the Embargo Act, like I just said, on trade, which devastated American trade. The embargo was later repealed, but the embargo was like a stop on trade with foreign ports because of the issues going on with Britain and France. When Madison became president, the U.S. issued Mason's Bill No. 2, which would encourage Britain and France to leave American ships alone. And so the thing was, either Britain or France agreed, the U.S. would trade with that country and issue an embargo with the other. And so if one of them agreed, then the other was going to be left out in terms of trading. And so France agrees, which means that the trade embargo would continue with Britain. And so they're going to start trading with France again, but not Britain. Britain began the practice of impressment, which meant American sailors were kidnapped and forced to serve in the British Navy. So this bill basically gave Britain and France an ultimatum, and France was the first to jump at the opportunity to trade with the U.S., and therefore they aren't going to trade with Britain, and that doesn't make Britain very happy. At the same time, there are conflicts with the Native Americans going on. Jefferson had recently, acquired the Louisiana territory, and you also start to see movement in toward the Indiana Territory, for example. And so American settlers want to push west into the territory occupied by natives. The U.S. had treaties in place with native tribes in these areas protecting the native land. In the Indiana Territory, Governor William Henry Harrison negotiated with tribal leaders to turn over 3 million acres to the U.S. Some leaders, including Shawnee leader Tecumseh and his brother Tenskwatawa, refused to agree and encouraged other tribes to resist. Tecumseh and Harrison worked on a compromise, but Tenskwatawa led an attack on Harrison's army. And so Harrison responds by attacking the Shawnee settlement of Prophetstown, later known as the Battle of Tippecanoe. And so there is a Tippecanoe, Indiana, and that is where this all took place. Tenskwatawa is also commonly referred to as the Prophet. So Tecumseh and Harris had made that agreement, and Harrison would help remove American settlers from the Shawnee Territory, and Tecumseh and his Confederacy would support Harrison and his army in a war with Britain, but this all changes when Tenskwatawa, or the Prophet, attacks Harrison's army. So war hawks is another term that comes about at this time, and so many of the Shawnee warriors during the Battle of Tippecanoe were found to have used British-made rifles. Obviously, that doesn't make the U.S. very happy because the British are supplying the natives with weapons. And so this led to a group of congressmen called the War Hawks to believe that the British were encouraging natives to attack American settlers. Adding in the British actions at sea, such as the impressment and other issues, war hawks, who were members of the Democratic and Republican Party, pushed for war against Britain. The Federalists were opposed to war as it would hurt their economy, and they were very dependent upon trade. And in the end, James Madison would encourage Congress to declare war in a letter dated June 12, 1812. And so that's when we see the beginning of the War of 1812. And so this is a little blurb from Madison's message about the war. The conduct of the British government represents a series of acts hostile to the United States as an independent and neutral nation. British cruisers have been in the continued practice of violating the American flag on the Great Highway of Nations and of seizing and carrying off persons sailing under it. We behold and find on the side of the Great Britain a state of war against the United States. So just a quick little analysis of this blurb to kind of understand what he's talking about. He says, British cruisers have been in the continued practice of violating the American flag on the Great Highway of Nations. What could the Great Highway of Nations be? What's an area commonly shared amongst nations? The sea, right? So he's saying that British cruisers, British ships, are violating the American flag at sea by doing things such as impressment, and of seizing and carrying off persons sailing under it. And so they're invading these ships, and they're kidnapping these people and forcing them to work for the British Navy. So that is actually going to be it for today in terms of this PowerPoint. There are going to be a few questions on your exit ticket about this PowerPoint, so make sure that you are attentive to that. And then there's also the new ZLA reading that was posted yesterday through A through K. That is also posted for the rest of the group to finish. And yeah, just make sure you get everything turned in today. Have a nice snow day at home.